With me is Heela Najibullah. She's a researcher in Switzerland and also the eldest daughter of someone who was brutally murdered by the Taliban in 1990s in broad daylight in Kabul. Welcome to Wion, ma'am. My first question to you is how do you see the current Afghanistan, the Afghanistan of 2020s versus the Afghanistan of 1990s when we know it was a complete civil war?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I must say, at the moment, we're once again at a very critical political juncture in the context of Afghanistan. I say this especially following the peace process in the past 2.5 years. There are elements, for example, in the peace process and the way the whole process has evolved that creates quite a lot of concern as to what we have ahead of us. For example, some of the loopholes that I would like to highlight here in the peace process has been the fact that it's not been inclusive. So the Afghan government was kept out of the whole process. The voice of the Afghans were not really included. Um, in addition to that, for example, the government needed to have a more solid strategy and mechanisms to ensure that reconciliation is moved forward. So these are some of the gaps that I have, as a researcher, observed. But also, I see that there is a struggle. There is a struggle between a destructive a way of going ahead and building a shared future for peace. Now, what is the choice that the Afghans and their international partners would like to support is something remains to be seen.
Ma'am, so do you see history being repeated in Afghanistan? What happened in 90s? What happened with your father? How a government was overthrown by a group of mujahids. This time around, there is worry, of course, regarding Taliban. So do you see the history being repeated? And also, can we trust, in fact, the Afghan government and the Afghan people trust the Taliban?
Look, if you look at the parallels of my father's government and what's going on right now in Afghanistan in terms of peacemaking, remember that he, in 1987, had his government had announced the National Reconciliation Policy, and they wanted to make peace with the Mujahideen. He had also requested from Zahir Shah, the then king who was based out of Rome, to come back. So the point was to be able to have an inclusive political way out of the crisis that was caused by the Cold War. But currently, if you look at it, the narratives that was used at that point of time is very much similar. The narratives of the Mujahideen is very much similar to the narratives that the Taliban are using. I'll give you some examples. The government is illegitimate, right, which was said at that point of time. The fact that the security apparatus and the defense apparatus that exist have to be dissolved. They tried to say exactly the same thing in different ways to my father's government. The fact of the matter that they're freedom fighters, that is the fact that they're kicking out or the occupiers, and yet we know that the US bases will remain in Afghanistan. So these are some of the political narratives that you see as repetition. And when you view this, you need to be considerate, you need to be aware to ensure that the future that we're making in Afghanistan is not repeated, so that there is vacuum of power, that there is civil war again, that there is more violence. As far as the trust is concerned, trust for the Taliban, since the peace process, whatever they've said in terms of negotiations, actually they've acted against it. So whether it is reduction in violence, whether it is target assassinations, the fact of the matter that they would sit with the Afghan government, now they're saying that the Afghan government is illegitimate. So their words need to be taken cautiously, that it really, on the surface, it has a different meaning, whereas their actions say something else.
Ma'am, I know it's a painful memory, what happened with your father. If you can talk us about perhaps that incident, when you got to know about that incident, because that was an incident which is considered geopolitical shock as well.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know what aspects of it do you want me to highlight. I think it's known very well worldwide how he was assassinated along with his brother, and that their bodies were hanged for 2 days. I remember we tried our best to negotiate with the UN and other partners to ensure that the bodies are brought down, that there's an investigation as to who killed or assassinated them. Unfortunately, none of that happened at that point in time. I remember talking to him the night before his killing. He had called us up on satellite phone. It was around 4 or 5 o'clock Indian time, I remember, because it was my last grade of school in India when he called. And he just wanted to say hello and that I should take care of my sisters and my mother. And he wanted to say hello to everybody. But I asked him, the Taliban are 40 kilometers away from you. What does that mean? And he said, I don't have time to talk very much. Take care of your family. And that was it. And by 1:30, the news was out in BBC that he was perhaps taken out of that he was taken out of the UN or so. So that's what I can tell you in short. But what I would like to highlight here is the fact that what happened to my father remains a mystery. And this is why my mother on 31st of May 2020 did issue a statement requesting officially the Afghan government and also the UN to do a thorough investigation to find out who were behind his and his brother's assassination. And I think that needs to be considered if we want to have peace, because peace without truth and justice is not possible.
But who do you suspect are responsible for the killing? The forces, because there are a lot of reports coming. In fact, some even blaming the Pakistan secret agency ISI. So, what do you think, or who do you think are responsible for the killing?
Well, there are not only 1 or 2 reports. There are quite a lot of reports indicating that it was the establishment in Pakistan, and even the Americans have written about this. And recently, in the past 1 year, I have heard interviews of Taliban members on Afghan TV channels like Tulu and other that said it wasn't us who killed Najibullah. So the question remains, who killed him? And why was he killed? And this is extremely crucial in order for us to be able to understand why the leaders of Afghanistan, who want a strong, independent, self-sufficient Afghanistan, are targeted. So this is something that we need to look at. The region needs to look at. UN needs to look at, especially if we're talking about peace, especially if we're talking about truth, and we're talking about justice.
But personally, I mean, do you think Pakistan is responsible? I mean, do you think, is it your feeling as well? Do you suspect them?
Well, feelings that, when you belong to a political family, there's so many conspiracies, so many stories, so many issues. But I must say that the role of Pakistan in the Afghan war since the Cold War has been very destructive. So whether they really had hands in killing my father is something that needs to be established. For example, Peter Thompson in his book has mentioned this, but is it just mentioned by an American ambassador, or is it something that he knows? How does he know, and or does it have to be determined internationally? That a president of another country, or like Afghanistan, is killed in daylight and there's no investigation, there's complete silence.
Mm-hmm. Okay, ma'am, you just said you belong from a political family, and you do belong from a very, very strong, famous political family. Any plans to go to Afghanistan and perhaps start it again, part of the political journey? I mean, you have an impressive lineage, and perhaps you will get people support as well.
Well, I know I will go back to Afghanistan. When the time is right, I will go on where my father and my uncle are buried. That's something that will eventually take me back, I know. As long as political lineage, yes, I do have this luckily with my father's achievement, I do have this, and I'm proud of it. I don't consider myself as a politician, and I must say that as the day passes by, Afghans, especially the Afghan youth, have realized the values that my father stood for, of national unity, of progressive Afghanistan, of democratic Afghanistan, how he wanted peace. His patriotism, for example, his slogan of Watan Yo Kafan is still chanted by the NDSF in Afghanistan. So this is something that does encourage a lot of youth to look up to him and have his vision as a guideline for them to establish an independent, strong Afghanistan. But for that, they need to have a structure. They need to have a political possibility to raise their voice and represent their ideas. For example, I was asking one of my father's colleagues, why aren't they more overtly talking about the current situation? And he was basically saying that the party is not even allowed to be registered, even though in the past 19 years we've had democracy. So imagine having an Emirates and trying to then raise your voice. That's the most difficult issue at the moment. If you want to have a political structure in place where the youth could bring his vision come true.
But my last question to you is your views about India. India is a place you have been to. India has close relationship with Afghanistan. Afghans and Indians, the friendship is much celebrated. Your views about that relationship and about India?
Yeah, well, I did grow up in India. I studied my schooling in India. I've not been living now for a while, and I learned a lot from your country. India and Afghanistan share a very deep history in culture. And for me personally, it's been a place where it allowed, if Afghanistan give me my roots, India give me wings to fly. So it nurtured me. And for me, India has played a very constructive role since 2001. With the kind of projects they've had in Afghanistan, the kind of relationship they've established with the Afghan government, which I applaud actually. And the fact of the matter that they did not only build libraries, but I remember how reading and talking to Afghans who were excited about the cricket grounds that India was building, the fact that the parliament building was built by Indian aid, the roads that connected the whole of Afghanistan. And so I was actually studying in India when Afghan students came to be educated and do their masters. We have even some of our ministers today in Afghanistan who studied in India. So for me, India has been a friend, and all their deeds, as long as I know Afghans, will remember and cherish.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to Wion. It was a pleasure talking to you, talking especially about this relationship, India-Afghanistan relationship, and of course, learning about the history of Afghanistan.
Thank you, and yeah, all the best.